Welcome everybody, we're back with today's question. This one says, Vinny, I want to get certified in hypnotherapy. I'm a coach and a therapist. I want to add hypnotherapy to both of these modalities. Yeah, okay, that's cool. So here's the thing that's really, really important to consider. I think certifications, there's a value in them insofar as you need them to practice. Like there's going to be different, it's literally in the US at least, it can vary state by state. I don't really know about the rest of the world. So there's different requirements. To the extent you're required to get a certification, that's a qualifier for you. That's one thing to consider. And of course, like any professional, you're going to continue to expand your education and you're going to get more experience. The reality here is that certifications in no way indicate a higher quality of training. And what I mean by higher quality of training, it doesn't necessarily indicate whether or not you're going to take that training and be able to impact your clients effectively. That's a completely different thing, right? Imagine it's like this. Imagine if you were an alien and you're kind of going around the world and you're flying saucer and you're looking at traditional hypnotherapy trainings, right? And the processes are all very similar, right? Greet the person, rapport, pre-talk, inductions, deepeners, some fractionations, techniques. Maybe the person reads scripts to them, right? That's one thing, or not, I don't know. And then they bring them out, right? So more or less the approach itself is scripted in the sense that there is a protocol that's being delivered and it's basically, you know, they might try, if you're this type of person, here's this approach. If you're that person, here's this approach. But there is a scripted nature to it. There's nothing wrong with it. If it gets results, you know, let's go. That's awesome. Now, if you're in that flying saucer and you're observing these different trainings, would you say all of these trainings are radically unique from one another, or would you say they're mostly the same with minor variation? This is something to consider, right? I would have to think they'd probably say they're mostly the same with minor variation, because maybe this person has, they emphasize this part of it, or maybe they do some tapping, or they have, you know, a couple of, maybe this one has more tools, okay? So you get to learn more things. So there's a bit more of a bang for your buck there. Maybe this one offers more of a one-on-one instruction. Maybe there's a better community. So these are the different types of things you would be considering if you're looking at training in traditional hypnotherapy. Of course, price might be a concern, but I would suggest, if you really vibe with a community, you really vibe with a teacher, I think you're going to want to go in that direction, honestly. And maybe you can save a little bit of money over here, but you know, if you really feel compelled in one direction, I would say consider that. Now, I want to talk about my training because it's quite different from that traditional model. What's different is, well, just for starters, you know, we're not focused on rapport. We're not focused on inductions, pre-talks. I don't use any of those techniques at all. All I'm training hypnotists to do is to sit in front of that client and to observe unconscious expression. And once they notice it, what to do with that, or to explore the nature of that problem in such a way that we can find what's underlying that symptom. And then once we get to that, there is naturally emergent phenomena, and it's hypnotic in nature, right? I see catalepsy, I see hallucinations, I see spontaneous regressions. But I'm not going into that session, and I'm not teaching hypnotists to go into a session with the idea that, like, we need to regress to a cause, right? Like, we have no way of knowing what that person needs to solve the problem. And if we just accept that reality, it's like the pressure's off us. But what I'm training hypnotists to do is to be able to understand what that unconscious mind is communicating to them. What is it saying needs to happen? And then we just use that. And this is a very fast way to work. And you're not having to spend time going through that traditional process. You can just catch trance as it occurs naturally. So there's no reason to worry about, like, do I have a good pre-talk? Do I have this down? Do I have that down? Building a lot of expectation. These are things that we're not as concerned with when I work with a client or when I teach people, right? It's more about what happens organically. And that organic phenomena, if it's coming from their mind, I value that more personally than any conscious presumptions I have or a structure or a system I can bring to that client and try to fit them through. That may or may not work again. Now, I don't there's one thing to consider here, like what I'm talking about is quite a sophisticated way of working with people. Any of the traditional models out there, I know sometimes they'll fight against each other, but like they're still outclassing greatly by high magnitudes of order any other therapeutic intervention on the planet, for the most part, right? You do see this like when they've tried to isolate these studies. More often than not, what I've seen is that traditional hypnosis, and I don't even know if they're really accounting for the skill of the practitioner, the experience. Sometimes they're playing a recording and they're having a room full of people listen to a recording, and people are still creating change. This is wild, and a lot of times it's instant. So these are things to consider. You really can't go wrong here. I just would hesitate to say that, like, to the extent if you don't need a certification, I wouldn't let that be a thing for you unless you really feel like you need that piece of paper. But that's a bit of a trap, isn't it? Like, there's always more pieces of paper out there to get and put on the wall. What's really, really exciting is being able to do this stuff with a client and see the life-changing impact that is made through working with them, right, as they empower themselves and make these changes. So these are just my ideas about it. I hope that helps. If you absolutely do need a certification, let me know. I have some really, really great programs I can recommend to you. I'm happy to do that. Take a look at my training as well, and see if that's something you're interested in pursuing. It's 2 full days of just doing this. There's no theory, right? We literally are just working with people doing it. So that's the best way to get good at stuff, is to do it, right? So that's what I do. And there's plenty of people out there that have really mastered talking about the history of this in a way and teaching inductions. I would rather have folks learn that elsewhere. It just doesn't make sense. I'm not really adding much. I'm doing something completely different. So, yeah, lot here to impact, lot here to consider, I meant to say. And so, yeah, fire away if you have questions. Let me know if you do need a certification. I'm happy to show you some programs and some fantastic trainers out there that can do that for you. Take care, everybody.